As the clock struck midnight, Donovan stepped into his lavish penthouse, oblivious to the silent figure on the cold tile floor. Clara, his devoted maid, had spent countless nights in that position, sacrificing her comfort to care for his family's needs. But tonight, the faint rustle of paper whispered secrets he never wanted to hear. When he discovered the letter revealing her desperate plight, a dying mother and mounting medical bills of $50,000, his heart shattered. This was more than negligence, it was betrayal of the worst kind. My name is Donovan. I didn't just ignore her, I ignored my own humanity. My mind raced as I tried to comprehend the gravity of what I had just discovered. Clara had always been the quiet presence in my life, bustling about the mansion, a ghost who filled the spaces I overlooked with her relentless energy and dedication. I had never considered the weight of her burdens, the sacrifices she made each day. Now, with the letter crumpled in my hand, I felt a mix of shame and a burgeoning sense of responsibility. The realization that I had been so self-absorbed that I failed to see Clara's struggles gnawed at me. I had allowed my wealth to blind me to the reality of those around me, even those who worked for me and helped shape my world. Standing in my lavish living room, the walls adorned with art that cost more than some families earn in a year, I felt a disconnect that made me uncomfortable. The plush carpets beneath my feet felt like a mockery of Clara's choices. How had I allowed this disparity to persist? It was easy to dismiss her living on the floor as a quirk of her character, a testament to her dedication, but it was more than that. It was a painful reminder of her desperation, a vivid illustration of the lengths she would go to for her daughter, Lily. I needed to act, but how? My first instinct was to confront Clara, to lay it all out and offer her help, but I hesitated. I didn't want to make her feel like a charity case. After all, she held her head high despite her circumstances. It was one of the things I admired most about her. She had a quiet strength that I had never fully appreciated. Instead of rushing to her, I decided to think it through. I needed a plan, something that would respect her dignity while allowing me to offer support. The next morning, I found myself wandering into the kitchen, the heart of the home that Clara ran like a well-oiled machine. The aroma of fresh coffee filled the air, its warmth soothing my frayed nerves. Clara was busy preparing breakfast for Lily, who was at the small table, her laughter ringing like music as she played with a bright red toy. In that moment, I realized how much I had taken for granted, this small family, this life. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation I was about to initiate. "Clara," I said, my voice uncharacteristically soft. She turned, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. "Can we talk for a moment?" Her brow furrowed slightly, an indication that she sensed my seriousness. She nodded and wiped her hands on her apron, her demeanor shifting to something more formal, as if preparing for a difficult discussion. We stepped into the adjoining room, a study, adorned with leather-bound books and plush furniture, but it felt stifling compared to the lively kitchen. I gestured for her to sit, but she remained standing, her posture straight and proud. "What is it, sir?" she asked, her tone cautious. I took a deep breath, knowing I had to tread carefully. "I found something last night," I started, feeling the weight of my words. Clara's eyes widened slightly, fear mingling with curiosity. I hesitated, unsure of how to convey my thoughts without causing her pain. "It was a letter about your mother." Her expression hardened, and I rushed to continue. "I had no idea, Clara. I didn't understand what you were going through." For a long moment, silence hung between us, thick with unspoken truths. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling but resolute. "I didn't want you to know. I didn't want pity." The fire in her eyes ignited a sense of urgency in me. This wasn't just about her circumstances. It was about dignity and pride, elements I had overlooked. "You deserve help, Clara," I urged, the conviction in my voice surprising even myself. "I can assist you with the bills, help you find a better solution. You shouldn't have to live like this." She shook her head, her resolve unwavering. "I can't accept that, Donovan. I need to earn my way. I've sacrificed so much for Lily. I won't let anyone think I can't take care of my own family." Her words stung, cutting deep into the layers of my privilege. I had lived a life of comfort, assuming that wealth equated to worth. It was clear now that my understanding of value was utterly flawed. I realized that for Clara, accepting help meant acknowledging her vulnerabilities, a notion she could not bear. "But Clara," I pressed gently, "what about your future? What about Lily's future?" At the mention of her daughter, her expression softened slightly, and I seized the opportunity to bridge the chasm of our disparate worlds. "We can work together. I want to support you, but I also want to respect your wishes. What if we explored options, perhaps a better job for you, or even help with your mother's medical needs without compromising your pride?" Clara studied me, her gaze piercing through my carefully constructed facade. "Why now? Why do you care all of a sudden?" I swallowed hard, realizing that my own transformation had begun. "Because I can't ignore what's right anymore. I've been selfish, and I want to change that. I want to understand you and help you in a way that honors your strength." For the first time, I saw a flicker of hope cross her face, but it was quickly replaced by caution. "I need to think about it," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. As she turned to leave, I called after her, "I'm here, Clara, whenever you're ready." I watched her walk away, and for the first time, I felt a connection that transcended our roles. A small flame ignited within me, fueled by the desire to prove that empathy could bridge the divides I had created in my life. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I hoped that my attempt to reach out would not only help Clara, but also mend the rift with my own estranged father, Samuel, who had his own demons to face. As I stood in the dimly lit room, Clara's words echoed in my mind, swirling around my consciousness like ghosts of my past. Each syllable held weight, pulling me back into memories of my childhood, memories that I had buried deep beneath layers of success and wealth. It was time to confront those memories and the man who had shaped my life in ways I had tried so hard to forget, my father, Samuel. The man I had spent years avoiding, convinced that his failures had somehow seeped into my own identity, tainting my achievements. I had built my empire on the belief that hard work and determination would shield me from the pitfalls he fell into. But standing there in that moment, I felt the walls of my carefully constructed world begin to shake. Clara, with her unwavering dedication, had become a mirror, reflecting the truth of my life back at me. I had taken for granted her sacrifices, her quiet resilience, and her fierce love for Lily. I had dismissed her existence as mere support staff, overlooking the profound impact she had on my everyday life. Now, the reality of her circumstances pressed down on me, heavy and insistent. I suddenly realized that in my pursuit of success, I had become blind to the suffering of those around me. I needed to change that, and it began with understanding Clara's story. I approached her slowly, my heart pounding with a mixture of trepidation and determination. "Clara," I said softly, trying to keep my voice steady, "can we talk? I want to understand." Her head lifted, surprise flickering across her face, and I could see the caution in her eyes. It was clear she hadn't expected this from me, and I couldn't blame her. Our interactions had always been transactional, marked by formality and unspoken boundaries. But those boundaries needed to crumble if I was to make amends, not just with her, but with myself. Clara nodded, her expression softening as she gestured to the small kitchen table. We sat across from each other, the air thick with unsaid words. "Why do you sleep on the floor, Clara? You deserve a bed, a life free from this kind of hardship." I hated how desperate I sounded, but the truth was I could no longer ignore the truth of her sacrifice. As she started to explain, the weight of her story struck me with a force that felt almost physical. She spoke of Lily's dreams, of how every penny she saved was a step toward a brighter future for her daughter. a future she was determined to provide despite her own sacrifices. The more Clara revealed, the more I began to grasp the depth of her commitment. "I've been saving for her education," she explained, her voice steady despite the emotion behind her words. "I want her to have opportunities I never had, to be able to choose her path without worrying about money." Each word opened a door to her reality, a reality I had turned my back on for far too long. Suddenly, my own life, filled with luxury and privilege, felt like a hollow echo compared to Clara's selflessness. I was sitting in my mansion, surrounded by wealth, while she was sacrificing her comfort for love. I couldn't help but think about my own estranged father, Samuel, and how his choices had left scars on my life. I had always thought that abandoning him was a form of self-preservation. But now I understood that it had also been an act of ignorance. I was too caught up in my own struggles to see his humanity, too proud to recognize the pain he carried. I wanted to reach out to him, to extend a hand and attempt to mend the broken pieces of our relationship. However, my plans would have to wait. There was a more immediate issue at hand. "Clara," I said, my voice firming with resolve, "I want to help. You shouldn't have to live like this. I can offer you a proper room in the house, and I want to ensure that Lily's future is secure." The look on her face was a mixture of shock and disbelief, and for a moment I feared I had overstepped my bounds, but I pressed on, driven by a newfound purpose. "You have dedicated your life to this family, and I want to show you that I appreciate everything you do. It's time to prioritize your comfort and happiness." Tears pooled in Clara's eyes, and I felt a warmth spread through me, a sense of connection I had never experienced before. She hesitated, clearly overwhelmed by the magnitude of my offer. "Donovan, I appreciate it, but," she began, but I cut her off gently. "No buts. You deserve more than what you've settled for. You fought hard for Lily, and now I want to fight for you both." I couldn't let my own fear of vulnerability stop me from doing the right thing. In that moment, I realized that helping Clara was not just an act of charity, it was a necessary step in my own journey toward redemption. The weight of my own privilege was becoming unbearable, and I needed to act before the guilt swallowed me whole. As she nodded slowly, finally accepting my offer, I felt an incredible sense of hope blossom within me. I knew this was just the beginning, a first step toward healing not only my relationship with Clara, but also the festering wound between me and my father. With that newfound determination, I resolved to reach out to Samuel. I would confront my past and face the man who had hurt me so deeply. But I was ready now. I wanted to move beyond the resentment that had held me captive for so long, and Clara's example of sacrifice and love would guide me through the process. In the days to come, I would not only be a better employer, but also a better son, a better man. And perhaps, just perhaps, I would find a way to mend the broken ties that had kept me from truly living. Join me on this journey of redemption and discovery, where every act of compassion and connection holds the power to reshape our lives. Don't miss out on the unfolding story. Subscribe to follow along. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the grand windows of my mansion, illuminating the marble floors and gilded fixtures that had long ceased to dazzle me. As I moved through the space, I felt a stirring of motivation, a newfound sense of purpose that transformed my mundane routine into something more significant. I couldn't shake the image of Clara curled up on the floor, her face serene despite her uncomfortable surroundings. It struck me that while I had spent years accumulating wealth, I had overlooked the very real struggles of those closest to me. Clara's sacrifices weighed heavily on my conscience, and I was determined to make amends, not just for her sake, but for mine as well. I resolved to have a conversation with Clara that would go beyond the usual pleasantries. As I descended the staircase, I found her in the kitchen, preparing breakfast with the same grace and efficiency she brought to every task. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, and I couldn't help but appreciate how her presence added a warmth to the otherwise cold grandeur of my home. I hesitated, unsure of how to approach her without sounding condescending. Finally, I cleared my throat and stepped forward. "Clara, can we talk?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual yet earnest. She turned, her expression shifting from surprise to concern. "Of course, sir. Is something wrong?" I could see the worry etched on her face, and it struck me how much responsibility she carried, not only for her daughter, but also in her role in my life. "No, nothing's wrong. I just wanted to discuss, well, the way things are between us." Clara nodded, placing a wooden spoon down on the countertop. "I'm listening." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my words. "You've been with me for a long time, and I've taken your loyalty for granted. I want to understand your situation better, especially regarding Lily. I know you've made sacrifices, and it's time I acknowledge that." Her eyes softened, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of hope. "Thank you for saying that, Donovan. It means a lot." She paused, hesitating as if weighing whether to open up completely. "Lily is my world. Everything I do for her future. I'm not asking for anything extravagant, just the opportunity to give her a better life." As she spoke, I realized I had never considered the depth of her struggles, the dreams she harbored for her daughter. "Clara, I want to help. I don't want you to feel like you have to sacrifice your comfort for her. You deserve more than just a floor to sleep on." She shook her head slightly, a mixture of gratitude and disbelief crossing her features. "I appreciate that, but it's not about comfort for me. It's about showing Lily the value of hard work and dedication. I want her to understand that success doesn't come easy." I admired her tenacity, but it also made me question my own values. "What if I offered you a room? It would be a small change, but it's the least I can do. You deserve a place in this home that reflects your worth, not just as my employee, but as a person." Clara looked taken aback, her eyes widening in surprise. "Are you serious? I wouldn't want to impose. I'm not sure how that would work." "It's not an imposition. You've devoted years to this household, and I realize now that I want you to be a part of it, not just as a maid, but as a valued individual. Besides, Lily deserves to have her mother comfortable and at ease." Tears shimmered in Clara's eyes, and I felt a swell of emotion as I watched her struggle to process my words. "Thank you, Donovan. You don't know how much this means to me and to Lily." Her gratitude was sincere, but it also stung, a reminder of how I had failed to see her as anything more than an employee until now. "I'm trying to understand. I've lived in a bubble of privilege for too long, and it's time I open my eyes. You and Lily deserve so much better." We stood in silence for a moment, a new understanding forming between us. I felt a shift in our dynamic, as though the walls I had built around my heart were crumbling. A sense of responsibility washed over me, both for my family and for Clara and Lily. I needed to take action, to help them navigate the world beyond the boundaries of my wealth. "Clara, I'd like to meet Lily," I said, surprising myself with the boldness of my request. "I think it's important for me to know the girl who means so much to you." She smiled, a genuine beam of joy breaking through her earlier trepidation. "I'd love for you to meet her. She'll be thrilled to know her mother has been talking about her with you." As we spoke, I felt a warmth enveloping my heart, a burgeoning connection that transcended class barriers. It was time to break down the invisible walls that had kept us apart. I resolved to do more than just offer assistance. I wanted to cultivate a relationship built on trust and understanding. Later that day, I found myself pacing the hallway, anxiously awaiting Clara's return with Lily. When the door swung open, the sight of Clara holding her daughter's hand filled me with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Lily was a spunky little girl with curly hair and bright eyes that radiated curiosity. "Donovan, this is Lily," Clara introduced, her voice filled with pride. "Hi, Lily," I said, kneeling to her level, trying to appear approachable. "I've heard so much about you." "Really? What did you hear?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with mischief. I chuckled, charmed by her audacity. All good things, I promise. Your mom has told me that you're quite the artist. Lily's face lit up, and she glanced at Clara, who nodded encouragingly. I like to draw pictures of animals, she declared, her excitement palpable. Would you show me some of your artwork sometime? I asked, feeling a genuine connection forming. Sure, I have a whole book of them, she exclaimed, bouncing on her feet. As I looked at Clara, I saw a mixture of pride and relief in her expression. In that moment, I realized that the journey I was embarking on would not only reshape my relationship with her, but would also influence Lily's life in ways I could not yet imagine. It was a small step, but it felt monumental, an opening of hearts and a bridge toward understanding that I had previously thought impossible. I watched Clara as she gathered her things, her movements fluid and practiced, yet now imbued with a new sense of hope. As she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, I noticed how the weight of her circumstances seemed to lift just slightly, as if the air around us had shifted in some profound way. I wanted to ask her more about her dreams for Lily, to understand the world she envisioned for her daughter, but the words felt clumsy in my mouth. Instead, I simply nodded, a silent promise of support that I hoped would resonate with her. After a moment of silence, I broke the stillness. Clara, I'd like to help. I want to understand your situation better, to be involved in Lily's future. What can I do? The sincerity of my words surprised me, but I knew they were true. I had often taken my privilege for granted, but now, staring into Clara's earnest eyes, I felt the urgency of change. It was time for me to step up, not just as her employer, but as someone who could actively contribute to her daughter's well-being. Clara hesitated, the flicker of uncertainty crossing her face revealing just how accustomed she was to bearing her burdens alone. I appreciate that, Donovan, she said slowly, her voice tinged with caution. But it's not just about money or material support. It's about believing in her, about showing her there's a world beyond the confines of this place. The depth of her words struck a chord within me. I realized that my approach could not be transactional. It had to be heartfelt. I needed to become an ally in their journey, not simply a benefactor. I found myself thinking of my father, Samuel, and the complexities that had long strained our relationship. The emotional distance between us felt so vast, shaped by misunderstandings and unspoken grievances. I began to wonder if perhaps this was a chance for me to confront my own demons while helping Clara and Lily. It would not only be a path toward forgiveness for Clara, but also an opportunity for me to mend the frayed connection with my father. If I could face him and understand his choices, might it enable me to see my own life in a new light? Would you be willing to let me spend time with Lily? I asked, my voice steady but hopeful. I want to encourage her, to show her she can dream big. I might not be a father myself, but I would love the chance to be a positive influence in her life. Clara's expression softened, and I could sense her assessing the sincerity in my request. It was a tender moment, one filled with the potential for growth and connection. I think she would like that, Clara replied, a small smile breaking through her initial hesitation. Just be patient with her. She's shy, but once she warms up, you'll see how bright she truly is. I felt a rush of warmth at the thought of connecting with Lily, and I made a silent vow to be the person she needed in her life. For too long, I had been ensnared in my own world, devoid of genuine relationships. Now, I was ready to embrace the vulnerability that comes with caring for others. The next day, I made a point to visit Clara and Lily more intentionally. I arrived at the house with a stack of books, colorful illustrations peeking out, and a few art supplies I hoped would spark Lily's creativity. As I knocked on the door, my heart raced with anticipation and trepidation. I wanted to make a good impression, to show them I was serious about this newfound commitment. When Clara opened the door, her eyes widened with surprise, but I could see the hint of amusement at my uncharacteristic enthusiasm. "Donovan, what's all this?" she asked, glancing at the bundle I held. I chuckled softly, feeling a bit sheepish. Just thought we could have some fun together. I remember how much I loved to draw when I was a kid. I thought Lily might enjoy it too. She stepped aside, letting me into the modest home that Clara had made so warm despite its simplicity. I found Lily sitting cross-legged on the floor, her fingers tangled in crayons, surrounded by half-finished drawings. When she looked up, her bright eyes shimmered with curiosity. "Who are you?" she asked, tilting her head slightly, her expression both cautious and intrigued. "I'm Donovan," I introduced myself, kneeling down to her level. "I've heard so much about you, and I brought some things we can use to make art together." Lily's gaze flickered to the pile of supplies, her curiosity piqued. Clara settled nearby, watching the exchange with a mixture of hope and apprehension. As we began to create together, I was struck by how easily the barriers began to dissolve. Lily's laughter filled the room as we experimented with colors and shapes, and I found myself losing track of time, captivated by the sheer joy of being present in that moment. With each stroke of the crayon, I felt a connection forming, a bridge that reached beyond my previous perceptions. I was no longer just the wealthy businessman who occupied the grand mansion. I was a friend, a mentor, and a supportive figure in Lily's life. Clara watched, a smile creeping across her face, and I realized how significant it was for her to see Lily thriving in a space that felt safe and nurturing. As we wrapped up our impromptu art session, Lily looked at her mother and then back at me with a radiant smile. "Can we do this again?" she asked, her voice innocent yet filled with a longing that tugged at my heart. "Absolutely," I replied without hesitation. It was more than just a promise. It was a commitment to be present, to invest in their lives. As I walked away from Clara and Lily that day, I felt an awakening within me, a sense of purpose that transcended my previous pursuits. I was ready to redefine what it meant to be a father figure, to embrace the complexities of my own family, and to understand the life lessons that Clara and her daughter would teach me along the way. The path ahead was uncertain, but I was no longer afraid. The days that followed my revelation were filled with a sense of urgency. I felt like I was walking a tightrope, balancing my old life with this newfound understanding of what truly mattered. Clara's sacrifices weighed heavily on my heart, and I found myself constantly thinking about her and Lily. They lived in a world that was starkly different from mine, yet their struggles mirrored my own in ways I had never imagined. I began to see Clara not just as a maid, but as a warrior, battling against the odds for the sake of her daughter. One evening, after a long day at the office, I sat in my study surrounded by the trappings of my wealth, fine art, expensive furniture, and the latest technology that promised to make my life easier. But instead of solace, all I felt was emptiness. I thought about Clara's small, cramped apartment, how she chose to sleep on the floor for her daughter's sake. I picked up my phone and stared at it, debating whether I should call her or not. I wanted to reach out, to offer her more than just a salary, but I was terrified of overstepping my bounds, of making her feel uncomfortable. Finally, I dialed her number. It rang once, twice, and then she picked up. "Hello, Mr. Donovan," she said, her voice a mix of surprise and formality. I hesitated, unsure of what to say. "Clara, I wanted to check in on you and Lily. How are you both doing?" My words felt clumsy, but she seemed to sense the sincerity behind them. "We're doing well, thank you. Just the usual. Lily is keeping me on my toes with her school projects," she replied, a hint of warmth creeping into her tone. I could picture her in her modest living room, surrounded by the remnants of a busy day. And it made me ache to see her struggle alone. We talked for a while, and the conversation flowed more easily than I had expected. She mentioned how she was trying to save up for Lily's dance classes, explaining that the little girl had shown an interest in ballet. As Clara spoke, I could hear the pride in her voice, and it made my heart swell. "I'd love to help with that," I said, almost without thinking. There was a pause on the other end, and I could almost hear her processing my offer. "Mr. Donovan, that's very generous of you, but I can't accept charity," she replied, her tone firm yet respectful. I felt frustrated. I didn't want her to see it that way. It's not charity, Clara. It's an investment in your daughter's future. You've given so much to me, I want to give something back. After a moment of silence, she sighed softly. If it's truly what you want, then I won't refuse. But I want to make sure that Lily knows she earned it, that she deserves it. Her conviction struck a chord within me. Clara wasn't just accepting help. She wanted to ensure her daughter understood the value of hard work and dedication. I admired that about her. I'll make sure she knows, I promise, I said, feeling a sense of excitement bubbling within me at the prospect of being a part of their lives in a more meaningful way. As the weeks passed, I made it a point to visit Clara and Lily more often. I brought books for them to read together and toys for Lily, but more importantly, I wanted to be there for Clara, to support her in whatever way she needed. I wanted to create a space where she felt comfortable asking for help, where she understood that her worth went beyond her role as my maid. I began to see her as a friend, someone who had walked a different path but shared my desire for a better future. One evening, I decided to host a small dinner at my mansion, inviting Clara and Lily to join me. The thought of them in my home made me feel a mix of excitement and apprehension. I wanted them to feel welcome and at ease, but I was also conscious of the vast differences between our worlds. When they arrived, I watched as Clara took in her surroundings, her eyes wide with a mix of wonder and discomfort. "It's beautiful, Mr. Donovan," she said softly, glancing at the grand chandeliers and the meticulously arranged dining table. I could see that she was out of her element, and it pained me to think that my lifestyle could create barriers between us. As we sat down to eat, I made a conscious effort to keep the conversation light and engaging. I asked Lily about her school, her favorite subjects, and her dreams, encouraging her to share her thoughts without reservation. Clara chimed in with stories from her own childhood, and I could see the bond between them flourish as they exchanged laughter and anecdotes. It was a joy to witness, and I felt a warmth spread through me. Realizing that this was the family connection I had longed for but had been too blind to see. Later in the evening, as I walked Clara and Lily to the door, I felt a surge of gratitude. "Thank you for coming tonight," I said genuinely. Clara smiled, her expression softening. "Thank you for inviting us. It means more than you know." I took a deep breath, knowing there was more to say. "Clara, I want you to know that I'm here for you and Lily, not just as your employer, but as a friend. You both deserve so much more than what life has thrown at you." Her eyes shimmered with unspoken emotions, and in that moment, I understood the power of connection, how two seemingly different lives could intertwine to create something beautiful. As I closed the door behind them, I felt a profound sense of purpose. I was no longer just a millionaire isolated in his mansion. I was part of something larger, a tapestry woven with love, sacrifice, and hope. I hoped that others could share similar stories of unexpected connections and relationships that changed their lives. Sometimes, the most profound lessons come from the most unlikely places, and I was determined to keep learning from Clara and Lily. If you have a story of how someone impacted your life or changed your perspective, I invite you to share it. Together, we can celebrate the connections that remind us of our shared humanity. As I stood there, grappling with the weight of my realizations, my thoughts turned to Clara and Lily. I had overlooked their struggles for far too long, blinded by my own concerns and the insulated world I had created around myself. The lavish lifestyle I led felt more like a gilded cage, a prison of my own making. Clara's quiet determination to provide for her daughter struck a chord within me, echoing the strained relationship I had with my father. In my pursuit of success, I had lost sight of the simple joys and connections that truly mattered. That evening, after a long day of meetings, I decided to seek Clara out. I found her in the kitchen, meticulously arranging a few flowers she had picked from the garden. The sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating her face, which held a mixture of calmness and weariness. "Clara," I started, hesitating, "can we talk?" She looked up, surprise flickering across her features, but she nodded and motioned for me to sit at the small table. I took a deep breath, my heart racing. I've been thinking about everything, the way I've treated you, the way I've ignored your sacrifices. I want to understand more about your life, about Lily. I want to learn how to do better. Clara's eyes softened, and I could see the weight she carried slowly lifting. Donovan, she began, her voice steady yet gentle. You've always been a good employer. I know you work hard, but sometimes it's easy to forget that we're all human, struggling in our own ways. Her words struck me deeply, and I felt a surge of shame. I've been so caught up in my own world that I couldn't see yours. I'm sorry for not recognizing the hard work you do, the sacrifices you make for Lily. You deserve better. Clara smiled faintly, a mix of gratitude and understanding. Thank you for saying that. It's not easy, but I do what I can for her future. I hope to give her the life I didn't have. In that moment, I realized that Clara's sacrifices mirrored my own in some ways. We were both seeking redemption, she through her hard work, and I through my newfound understanding. I began to share my own struggles, my distant relationship with my father, and how it had impacted my choices. Clara listened intently, her gaze unwavering. We all have our battles, Donovan. What matters is how we choose to fight them. The conversation unfolded like a delicate tapestry, weaving together our lives and stories. I began to see the mansion not just as my home, but as a shared space. I offered Clara help, not just in terms of finances, but in creating a more supportive environment for both her and Lily. I proposed a scholarship fund for Lily's education, inspired by the dreams Clara held for her daughter. The more I talked, the more I could feel the walls around my heart crumbling, revealing an authentic connection that had been buried beneath my privilege. Days turned into weeks, and I made a conscious effort to connect with Clara and Lily. I would join them for dinner, often finding myself laughing with Lily, who had a knack for storytelling that brought light to the mundane. Watching Clara and her daughter interact warmed my heart. Their bond was a reflection of the kind of relationship I yearned for with my father. The more time I spent with them, the more I realized how my own upbringing had shaped my perceptions of love and loyalty. One rainy afternoon, I found Clara sitting on the porch, watching as Lily played in the puddles. I joined her, and together we marveled at the simple joy of childhood. Clara turned to me, her expression thoughtful. You know, Donovan, I've seen a change in you. It's as if you're beginning to let go of the burdens you've been carrying. I nodded, feeling lighter than I had in years. You've shown me that life is about more than just success. It's about connections, empathy, and understanding others. Clara smiled, and we both watched as Lily splashed in the rain, laughter echoing through the air. It was a sound I had long forgotten, buried beneath the noise of my corporate world. I felt a longing to embrace this life fully. As I grew closer to Clara and Lily, I began to understand the importance of family, not just in blood ties, but in the bonds we chose to nurture. However, my reconciliation with Clara was still shadowed by the presence of my father. The unresolved tension nagged at me, and I knew I needed to confront him. After many sleepless nights filled with thoughts of our past, I picked up the phone and dialed his number. My heart raced as it rang, but I was resolute. When he answered, his voice was gruff but surprised. "Donovan, is everything all right?" "Not really. We need to talk," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. I arranged to meet him the following weekend at a cafe, a neutral ground where we could face our demons. As the day approached, I recalled Clara's words about fighting our battles. I steeled myself for a conversation that I hoped would bring clarity and healing. When the day finally arrived, my stomach churned with anxiety. I arrived early, the bustling cafe filled with noise and chatter. My father walked in, looking older than I remembered. As he approached, I took a deep breath. "Samuel," I greeted him, and he nodded, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. "Donovan," he replied, his tone betraying little emotion. I gestured for him to sit, and as he did, I realized we were both filled with unspoken words. The time had come to break the silence, to address the chasm that had divided us for years.